So I had a couple of concerns about the Canon R7, and I talked about them in another video, it'll be in the description, at least if it doesn't pop up here. And the biggest criticism I got is that I am a spec sheet reviewer and that I didn't have the camera in my hand. So it's in my hand. Take that. It only cost me $1,500 to stick it to you. Moving on. So what I want to do is I want to give you my first impressions of the R7. I want to tell you the things I like about it, the concerns that I still or have now more than I did, and also what I plan to use it for, addressing my initial concerns along the way. Before I get started, if you like this content, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to check out my podcast. It's called Photobomb. I co-host it with my good friend Boo Ray Perry, and it comes out every week wherever podcasts are found. I also send out a weekly newsletter called Photographers Only. It has the latest updates on what gear I'm using, what videos I have coming out, free online webinars, workshops, any place that I'm going to be speaking, and all kinds of stuff. And you can sign up for that in the link in the description of this video. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you will also receive my free frequency separation action, which will absolutely change the way that you edit your images in Photoshop. So if you want that free action and all the information on where I'm going to be, what I'm doing, and all kinds of other cool free educational materials, sign up in the link below. So let's talk about what I like about this camera. The size, it's great. It's a little bit bigger than my RP and a little bit smaller than my R5. The weight's really nice in the hand. It feels substantial, yet it's lighter than a lot of the DSLRs that I used to use back in the day. The next thing is going to be the ergonomics. Canon is really, really good at ergonomics. It's got a great grip. It feels really good in the hand. And for the most part, it feels like an old friend. The EVF and the vari-angle LCD screen are great. They look a lot better than I thought they would based on the $1,500 price point of this camera. I know that's where they tend to cut costs, but I was surprised by how good they are. The images are accurate, and the LCD screen is very bright and responsive even in daylight. The autofocus is really snappy and responsive. I would put it above the R and RP, and maybe not quite as good as the R5, although I think in some ways you're going to find that it is a little stickier and a little bit faster for certain subjects than even the R5 is. So autofocus is great. The menu is very familiar with a few small improvements, including some visual aids to explain settings further, which is kind of neat. If you're a Canon user, you're going to feel very at home with this menu. All of the buttons and dials are really customizable, so once you get it set up, it works like a dream. And finally, just a couple of little things that I really like. First of all, the battery is the same as the R5 and the R6, and I love that because I've got a ton of those kicking around my studio. No need to buy additional batteries if you've already got a few of those kicking around. Now, the other thing I really like is the dual SD card slots. Me personally, I never use CF Express. I don't shoot in those super high frame rate video modes, and I hardly ever have any call for it. So I'm pretty much using my R5 as a camera with one card slot most of the time. Now, this gives me the opportunity to have two SD card slots, and I'm going to actually use them, which is pretty neat. So now let's get to the concerns. My first major concern, and you know what? Let me take that back. My first minor concern is the build quality. Holding the R5 and then holding the R7, it is very, very obvious that it is not nearly as robust. Now, for me, that's not a huge deal. 95% of the time, I'm in the studio or in air conditioning or indoors, not out there shooting wildlife and standing in the snow. But it is something to consider. The build quality feels a lot closer to my RP than it does to my R5. That being said, I've had my RP for 4 years and it's never let me down. So unless you're out there in extreme weather conditions, this might not bother you. It certainly isn't going to bother me. The next thing is the power button, and this is really kind of irritating. The power button has the video mode on it, so when you turn the camera from off to on, unless you've done this a couple of hundred times and you've got the muscle memory for it, you're going to end up putting into video mode like a lot. And if you only use the camera for video, which is fine, not going to be a problem for you. But if you're just trying to turn it on, it is a really weird design choice that I'm not really sure I love. You've also got the ISO button right here next to that dedicated record button. it's just such a strange place to put it. It's not really comfortable or easy to get to. So to combat that, what I've done is I've taken the control ring on all my RF lenses. I've changed it in the camera settings so that controls the ISO. So I guess I finally have a reason to use the control ring, and I guess that's a plus. But just a strange place to put the ISO control. And finally, the infamous click wheel joystick hybrid combo thing. I am honestly having trouble getting used to it. It's a little bit of a struggle. It's just in a weird place. And it's also, I keep going to this directional pad like it's a click wheel, and it's not. And so I'm sure that enough time and practice and muscle memory that goes with it, I'll absolutely get used to it. It is nice to still have that click wheel function. I'm not really sure why they chose to do it this way instead of just a click wheel. Maybe they're testing out something new, but either way, it's just different. I guess if you were to sum it up, most of my complaints, all my real complaints about the camera have to do with the button layout. And there's nothing wrong with it. If this is your main camera and the one you use all the time, you're going to get used to it in no time. But if this is a second camera or a third camera and you're switching back and forth between all the cameras in the R system, it is a little bit jolting to go from one to the other. If you have the R and the R5 and an R7 and an R6, they all have very different button layouts and functionality. And it's just sort of a very strange theme to keep changing those buttons when so many of us have the different cameras that we use right alongside each other. And so I'm not really sure what the impetus is behind the button layout changes, but you get used to it, but it's just not super intuitive to switch back and forth between two different cameras that came out 9 months apart in the same camera system. And that's just a little weird. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. High ISO, low light performance. I know it's been my main concern, and I'm sure that many of you out there have those same concerns when thinking about the R7. Well, let me tell you, shockingly, it does a really good job. Now, first of all, let me say that I shoot mostly in the studio between 100 and 400 ISO. However, when I do go out and shoot corporate events and things like that, I do get up into 3200, 400, even 6400 sometimes. And after testing this camera at the ranges where I normally shoot in situations looking at noise, I'm really surprised at how clean the files are. It's been a long time since I've owned an aps-c camera and tried to shoot with one on a job, so the technology, I'm certain, has come a long way. But if you shoot below 6400 most of the time, I don't think you're going to have any problem with this. Now, it's probably not going to be as clean as some of those full-frame censored cameras out there, but it is more than acceptable for the work that I end up giving my clients. And finally, my other big concern was the lens lineup for this cropped sensor. And I was a little bit worried about switching back and forth between full frame and aps-c. Really, as it ends up, because of the range of lenses I own, long, mid-range, and wide lenses, the only thing I'm really missing is an ultra-wide lens for the R7. Even my 16 to 35 essentially becomes like a 24. And so if you're shooting wide shots and real estate or video, you're not going to have anything like this until you get a much wider lens. The good news is I do have my R5 that I can use when I need those wider shots. So it's not nearly as big a problem as I thought it was. All that being said, aside from the weird button layout, I think that this camera is, surprisingly to me, a really great pro camera. And that's weird coming out of my mouth to tell people an aps-c camera is something I would recommend to another professional. It all depends on what you're going to use it for. But as far as features, function, and image quality, this is absolutely up to the task for pretty much everything that I do. And so depending on what you do, this thing is going to make some great images for you. So overall, I think it's a really great camera, value for dollar. Do you have the R7? Have you pre-ordered one? Are you on the fence? Do you have questions? Light up those comments and let me know, and I will answer you as much as humanly possible. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for your time.